So in 2024, your net salary after all deductions would be reducing. I'm sure you're wondering, what is this dude even talking about? You don't even work with me and you don't even know how much I earn. How on earth are you going to know about this? Well, let me explain. So CRA has just announced that the Canadian Pension Plan, otherwise known as CPP, will be increasing in 2024. I know that's quite scary, right?
Jeez.
Anyway, so I've put up the 4 chapters I'll be discussing in this video for easy navigation for you. So before I get into the details of the changes that will be happening in 2024, I want to just briefly explain what the CPP or Canadian Pension Plan is. So the CPP is a retirement pension plan where every Canadian worker that earns above the exemption amount is required to contribute until they get to the age of 65 years. So this implies that as long as you continue to work and you earn above the basic exemption amount, you'll be required or obligated to contribute to the CPP. So the purpose of the CPP is to protect every contributor and their family against the loss of income associated with death, disability, and even retirement. So it is specifically designed to cover just 25% of your income when you retire. So just to help you understand this even better, let me explain how CPP is currently calculated in 2023. So right now in 2023, CPP is calculated using just 4 simple steps. Step 1 is to determine the total pensionable income, which is a combination of the gross pay, taxable benefit, and all your allowances. So the current maximum limit for this is $66,600. Step 2 is to determine the basic yearly CPP exemption. So this exemption is established as a rebate to reduce the impact of the CPP on an income earner. So in 2023, it's going to be $3,500 per year. So step 3 is for you to deduct the basic exemption from the total pensionable income. So that's $66,600 less $3,500, and that should give you $63,100. Step 4 is for you to multiply the difference in step 3 by the contribution rate. So for employees, this will be 5.95% times $63,100, which should be $3,754.45. So this amount will typically be matched by your employer. But if you're self-employed, your contribution rate will be 11.9%. When you multiply that by 63,100, you should be getting 7,508.90. So this is the maximum CPP you will typically be contributing for 2023 as at today. But if you choose to determine what your CPP will be per paycheck, you just need to divide the pensionable income and the exemption amount by the number of pay periods. You can simply make reference to the CRA exemption chart to determine how many pay periods you should use to get your CPP for each paycheck. So what are the CPP changes we should be expecting to see in 2024? Number 1, we should be expecting to see a change in the maximum pensionable earnings limit or ceiling. So currently we just have one limit point or ceiling, which is the $66,600 I mentioned earlier. However, in 2024, 2 new ceilings will be introduced. That is where the change comes in. So by the way, I'm using ceiling interchangeably with limit or maximum point. So under ceiling 1, the maximum pensionable earnings will be changed from $66,600, which is the current rate, to $68,500 in 2024. In ceiling 2, an additional pensionable earnings of $4,700 has now been added to the ceiling 1. So when you add the sum of $4,700 to $68,500, it should bring the second earnings limit to $73,200. So what that implies is that if you earn between $68,500 to $73,200, you'll be subjected to the rates in the second ceiling. So before I move into the other changes that are expected in 2024 under the CPP, I want you to note that the additional $4,700 ceiling change in that's the ceiling 2 will be changing on a yearly basis going forward. For instance, in 2025, it's expected that the second ceiling will be increasing to 14% above the first ceiling. For instance, you will notice that the $4,700, which is the additional portion for ceiling 2, is equivalent to 7% of ceiling 1 of $68,500. However, in 2025, ceiling 2 would then be increased to 14% of what ceiling 1 will end up becoming in 2025. So this will continue on and on, 2026 onwards. This will continue to increase incrementally, and I suspect it's just to match up with inflation increases going forward. So on to the number 2 change, basic exemption amount. Now you're already aware that the basic exemption amount is $3,500, so this will remain unchanged year in, year out. So when you deduct the exemption amount of $3,500 from $68,500, which is a new ceiling 1, it should give you $65,000. Meanwhile, ceiling 2 remains $4,700 because no exemption amount applies to that. So number 3 change that we're expecting to see is the contribution rate. So in the current plan, Canadian workers are expected to contribute 5.95% of the pensionable earnings. However, in the new plan, ceiling 1 remains 5.95%, which remains unchanged, while in ceiling 2, a 4% rate is being applied, which was not there previously. So all these changes will result in a maximum CPP contribution of $3,867.50 under ceiling 1 and $188 under ceiling 2, which makes a total contribution of $4,055.50, which is an 8% increase from 2023 limits. So the fourth change that is expected is for the self-employed folks. Now in your ceiling 1, the rate is expected to remain unchanged at 11.9%. Meanwhile, at the ceiling 2 additional contribution, it's supposed to sit at 8% contribution rate. So once we multiply these two rates by the difference of $65,000 under ceiling 1 and $4,700 under ceiling 2, the maximum contribution then becomes $7,735 for ceiling 1 and $376 for ceiling 2. So this brings a total contribution of $8,111, which is still an 8% increase from the current rates. Now you need to bear in mind that all of these I've mentioned are just the maximum contribution into CPP. Now if you earn lesser, you'll definitely pay lesser than this. So the fifth change that we're expecting is around the retirement payment from the CPP. So previously, the retirement payment was supposed to cover just 25% of people's income. However, this is going to be increased to 33%. So this is likely what is resulting in increases in the CPP contribution and of course the addition of the ceiling 2 to our contributions. So let's take a few practical illustrations that can help you understand the changes that are expected in 2024 better. So let's assume we have an employee called Mike that earns $45,000 per annum. So because his gross salary is lesser than the maximum limit or the ceiling of $68,500 for 2024, his gross salary would then become the pensionable earnings. This also implies that the second ceiling does not apply to Mike in this case. So when we deduct the basic exemption amount of $3,500 and multiply that difference by the contribution rate of 5.95%, Mike's contribution would then become $2,469 for 2024. Now you notice that there is no difference between the results from 2023 and 2024 because the amount was less than the limits. Now let's take a second simple illustration. So let's assume we have a second employee whose name is Tom and he earns $70,000 per annum. Because his gross income of $70,000 exceeds the ceiling 1 limit of $68,500, they would have to use that amount, that's $68,500, as the pensionable income for the year. So when you deduct the limit of $68,500 from his gross earnings of $70,000, it leaves $1,500 extra. So that extra portion is what we're going to push onto ceiling 2 and apply the rates there. Now you notice that we did not use the ceiling 2 limit of $4,700 because the difference between $70,000 and $68,500 was just $1,500, which is lesser than that limit. So once we apply the contribution rate of 4% to the $1,500, this should bring Mike's contribution to $60 for 2024 under the ceiling 2. So in order to get his total contribution, we have to add the sum of $3,867.50 to $60, which will bring his total contribution to $3,927.50. So this is going to be his 2024 CPP contribution if he earned $70,000. I believe you can now see the clear impact of these changes on you, and of course we've established the fact that it affects both employers and employees alike. So employees will typically have lesser disposable income or take-home pay, while employers will have to incur more costs in order to match the employee's contribution. And of course, as is typical, most employers will have to find a way to transfer those things or those costs to their customers. On the other hand, this increase in contribution will be a good thing for seniors and retirees because it will increase the payment that is being given to them. Of course, we already established that it's moving from 25% to 33%, which is a good thing for them. The only downside of the CPP, which is clearly established, is that if a person dies before 65, those funds will not be transferred to his estate, which I think is pretty sad. So tell me, what are your thoughts about all of these changes? Do you think this is an unfair raise by CRA, and would this create more hardship for most Canadians? So please try and drop your comments or responses in the comment section below. I'll try my best to address them and of course respond as quickly as possible. So finally, feel free to like and share with anybody that will find these changes very important to them. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more valuable content. See you at the next video. Bye.